Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here from Zoobox, a podcast about nonsense, but we're going to be very serious today. No nonsense allowed on this video. We're going to be talking about the 4K for Sam Raimi's 1995, The Quick and the Dead. His B tier kind of homage to old school, kind of almost like middling 1950s westerns. He's most famous for, what most people know him for, or you either know him for Spider-Man or you know him from the Evil Dead movies and the Evil Dead TV show. He produced the TV show that was recently, Ash versus the Evil Dead, it was called. And he kind of wanted to do something different. This is a point in his career where he started kind of making less specifically Sam Raimi-y movies. He was trying different things, going out there, putting himself out there, and like I said, he wanted to do kind of an homage to a Western. But before we get into the actual story and maybe some of the production and some of the pros and cons of the movie itself, let's just talk about this release. Now, this came out in 2018. It came out in July of 2018, so 4K was kind of nascent. It had been around for a little while, but it wasn't just not a lot of people own 4K players. They're expensive. I mean, even to this day, they're kind of prohibitively expensive to buy a 4K player. I don't think it's, if 4K is to survive, I don't think it's really going to take off until consoles play 4K discs. So when the PlayStation 5 comes out, when the new Xbox comes out, there'll just be more of these in people's homes. There'll be more 4K TVs because of that. And that's kind of what happened with Blu-ray. If you remember, Blu-ray had a war. There was like a format war. It was HD video, or I think it was what it was called, HD DVD, and Blu-ray. And the thing that pushed Blu-ray as the winner, pushed it across the finish line, was the PlayStation 3, because it just put a Blu-ray player in everybody's homes. So time will tell with that. But this being an early release, I gotta say, not the greatest. It does have HDR. A lot of, smaller studios and stuff, they don't have HDR. We've talked about this before with RLGE. This is put out by TriStar and Sony. It has a really nice audio track. It's got Dolby Atmos, which was a new thing at the time, which this movie kind of benefits from, I will say, because, it's a movie about duels out in a small western town, and everybody's having this big showdown. So there's a lot of like whizzing bullets and stuff like that. A lot of, horse clopping around to fill your sound bar with. So in that sense, I think it was good. But the actual restoration, or whatever you want to call it, the upscaling, it was pretty lazy. You're definitely going to get that that finer detail just because it's 4K. But I was not super impressed with the HDR. I wouldn't even say this is a huge improvement over the Blu-ray that came out a few years before that. But this is kind of a bargain thing now. I got this for $8. There's a website, HamiltonBooks.com, and they're kind of like a liquidation center. They sell books and DVDs and CDs and Blu-rays, and now they sell 4Ks, and they must just buy bulk stuff, and this very similar kind of stuff to what you'd find like in a cheap bin at Walmart or the like. Although I will say Hamilton Books is totally worth checking out, because they will often have boutique label stuff like Scream Factory or Kino Lorber, those kind of outfits. They'll have some of their stuff for pretty decent prices. You actually recently, speaking of Sam Raimi, I got the Drag Me to Hell, the Scream Factory edition of Drag Me to Hell for like $11. Usually that runs from anywhere from like 18 to 25. And it even came with a slipcover. I got to do the same thing with the movie The Strangers. I was able to pick that up for $11. That's pretty great, because those movies generally are not that cheap. Every once in a while they'll show up on Amazon for that kind of price, but they won't have the slipcover, that's for sure, if you get it on Amazon. So I can't say that I didn't own this already, so it was worth picking up. But like I said, it is a subpar release, and not all the movies that came out at this time that they put into 4K are like that. Even from Sony. and TriStar. Like I have Bram Stoker's Dracula, Francis Ford Coppola's 1992 Bram Stoker's Dracula, and that looks really good. The HDR work was really great. I mean, it's probably not up to snuff as something like if they had done a version of it today. I think maybe the transfer tech is just better. The teams that work with HDR just have a better handle on it. So it is, but it's kind of like no excuse. It just did feel a little bit like they were just trying to put out titles. Because I'm sure when this came out, I'm sure it was like 25 to $30. Um, so that's in that sense, is a little bit of a bummer. But if you can get this for like $7 or $8 and you don't already have it, I would say give it a go. If you already have the Blu-ray, I probably wouldn't bother, honestly. I'm a huge Sam Raimi fan, right off the top. Huge Sam Raimi fan. The first Sam Raimi movie I ever saw was Army of Darkness. It's actually kind of a seminal movie for me, and my friends might laugh about this, at least one in particular. I used to watch Army of Darkness every Friday night for like 2 years. So I've seen Army of Darkness a lot of times. A lot of times. So much so that it actually took me a while to get it on, to get the Scream Factory version on Blu-ray, because I was just like, I own like the Screwhead edition, and I just didn't see any compelling reason to upgrade because I've just seen it so many times. I mean, eventually I relented. I bought it. I had to have it in my collection. But so I always had a huge affinity for Sam Raimi. Got me into filmmaking to some degree. It's kind of weird. I have a weird thing that like really got me interested in movie making was Citizen Kane and Army of Darkness. Those are the two movies that like really spoke to me and made me feel like I want to make movies someday. That was my plan for a lot of my life. So I always kept up with them, and so obviously I saw this. I saw it obviously after it came out, probably years after it came out. I probably didn't see this until the early 2000s, honestly, or I never saw the whole thing until the early 2000s. I might have caught snippets on like a movie channel or something like HBO or whatever it might have been on. And I was never a huge fan of it. And I was curious what my opinion would be upon a revisit. And while I think it's an interesting kind of showpiece for Sam Raimi's like technical ability, he's famous for kind of mixing comedy and slapstick with like horror, and then he kind of does it with the Western in genres that you wouldn't expect it to show up. Like that's what he does. That's his thing. Although he did make a few kind of straightforward movies, I would check them out. They're really good. He's got a Simple Plan, The Gift with Cate Blanchett, and then he did one other movie that actually I'm not a huge fan of is For the Love of the Game with Kevin Costner. And those are very, very straight movies. It's like he had to prove to himself that he could also tell stories that way and not be like Sam Raimi. They almost feel anonymous because of that. So relative to Quick and the Dead, he was definitely still using all of the tricks in his bag in terms of the kind of stuff he would present. And it's definitely an homage to kind of B-tier 50s kind of middling westerns. There were so many of them that came out in the 40s, 50s, and even the 60s. They were kind of a dime a dozen. They were just the popular genre, and TV shows were filled with them, like Bonanza. If you've seen Once Upon a Time in Mexico, they're not Once Upon a Time in Mexico, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. They're kind of like spoofing the industry of the Western, and kind of seeing it die. And this kind of harkens back to a little bit of that. Everybody is very simple. It's a very simple premise, very easy to understand, simple characters. It's not a lot of delving deep into the surface of any of these people. They are Western archetypes. The difference being that Sharon Stone is the kind of quote unquote lead. I mean, I think it's more of an ensemble piece at the end of the day, but she is, the de facto lead, and she's kind of playing a version of the Man with No Name, kind of a Clint Eastwood-esque kind of character that you would have seen in Clint Eastwood's, spaghetti Western stuff. Quiet, stoic, serious. As the story goes, more is revealed about her intentions and why she's there. And, what it reminded me of was Sharon Stone's a beautiful woman, first of all. and that's not taking away from anything other, anything else about her talent. I think she was kind of miscast here. She is too beautiful. Honestly, she's just too beautiful. If the analogy or if the comparison is supposed to be kind of your Clint Eastwood esque, spaghetti western character, she's just too beautiful. Clint Eastwood, while you could say he's a handsome man, and maybe the standards are different between, traditionally different between men and women. I mean, he's haggard as fuck in those movies. He's not like handsome man Clint Eastwood. He's dirty. He's grimy. And if I had actually one complaint about the whole movie in general, the only person that's kind of like dirty is Russell Crowe, and then a few of the other like lackey dudes. Everybody is. It's almost like too clean. They built a little western town on a back lot, it seems like, or sometimes actually in California, back from the old western days, they would have like sets kind of laying around. Another movie that utilized them in the past few years actually was Bone Tomahawk. They went down to one of these kind of preserved western little towns. Also, I think in the Valley of Violence with Ethan Hawke, they is a similar thing. But it's just kind of too clean. It just doesn't feel lived in a way that I think matches what the material is trying to kind of convey and put out there about these characters. They're not like haggard enough. Now, granted, there's some really fun performances. I think all the actors do really well. It's got, Gene Hackman, Russell Crowe, young Leonardo DiCaprio, Keith David is in it. What's his name? Tobin. Tobin Bell is in it. Lance Henriksen. He has a really great bit part. Gary Sinise. I just talked about The Stand recently. He shows up. He's got like a little extended cameo. And with the simplicity of the characters and the simplicity of the story, there isn't a lot to kind of latch onto, and I think it suffers from some pacing issues, and I think the pacing issues is because of the amount of characters. But the problem is when it's jumping between all the characters, it doesn't do a ton to kind of enrich them or endear them to you. They never really change or move beyond an archetype. And the way the story ends and how it plays out it feels like a foregone conclusion. Now, part of that, to be fair to the movie, is probably just my awareness of westerns and what it's kind of emulating or paying homage to. But so I don't know if that's a fault of the movie itself, particularly. You can definitely see what Raimi was going for, and I think largely he succeeds in that. He made a middling western. I just wish it was more intense or more engaging. There's a weird flatness to it. And every once in a while you get the Raimiism, you get the whoosh pans and the snap zooms and the cool editing and all the stuff that Raimi is kind of known for. And those parts are kind of thrilling. And he uses it pretty sparingly. There's a lot, large portions of the movie which feel kind of flat. And I just didn't buy into the world that he was trying to build and present in any real way. I kind of was left like, oh, okay, I watched that. It had been years. It had probably been like 15 years. What year is it? 2020? I'm going to say a solid 15 years since I had last watched this. I was probably like 18. And I kind of end up feeling the same way. I probably couldn't have articulated why I felt that way when I was 18. But now, as a graying 33-year-old man, as a full-grown man, a big boy, I think I have a better sense of what problems I actually have with it. There is no really special features on the disc. There's some deleted scenes. I would have loved to have heard an audio commentary for this, though. It would have been interesting to see, specifically what his intentions were, what he was referencing, and, all that stuff. But unfortunately, it's just kind of it's a mediocre movie, and it's kind of a blah transfer. The 4K is okay. The HDR it helps in some of the darker scenes because you're getting those black levels are definitely improved over kind of the muddiness of previous releases. But I wouldn't say it's enough to kick it over if you already own it, if you already have it in your collection on just Blu-ray. Because I don't believe this is a new transfer, quote unquote. It's just an upscale, it seems like, with some HDR added for good measure. And yeah, I don't know. I really enjoy this on paper. On paper, this is really cool. It's got a collection of great character actors to help the main cast. I mean, like Lance Henriksen has such a great part. He's really great. I would say Gene Hackman is really good. He's kind of, I would say more than anyone, him and a few of the bit people like seem to know exactly what kind of movie they're in. And Gene Hackman is just kind of the cackling heel, and he was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed Gene Hackman in this. I wish that it seems like Sharon Stone just could not modulate to the tone, and I don't know if that's a set thing. I don't know if that's a star thing. I've heard in the past that she can be kind of fickle to work with. I don't know. Leonardo DiCaprio, very solid young Leonardo DiCaprio performance. I guess this would have been a couple years beyond or around the same time as he was on Growing Pains. Like maybe a few years. Well, no, because a couple years after this, Titanic came out, right? This came out in 95, Titanic 97. So he was a star on the rise. Russell Crowe, kind of the same thing. This is before Gladiator. It's before he was kind of a big hot commodity in America. So it's interesting to see them in kind of these earlier performances before they were superstars, for sure. It's definitely interesting and cool to see that. It's I will say this, it is serviceably entertaining. Like you got 90 minutes to kill and you just want to watch something goofy and light. I would definitely recommend giving it a watch, for sure, especially if you've never seen it. It's worth watching. It's worth checking out. I'd say anything Raimi makes is worth checking out. I mean, hell, I'm not a big fan of the MCU movies. I find them mostly just mediocre and boring. But he was tapped to do Doctor Strange 2. So that will get me to watch an MCU movie. Raimi doing Doctor Strange will definitely get my butt in a seat somewhere. I don't know if it'll be a theater, but I will sit down and definitely watch that. I'm curious what he'll do with that stuff, because he's a unique voice and he's an important voice to me personally. And even though this is middling, it's still better than a lot of other things. More interesting, I would say. It's kind of it's got that interesting failure kind of aspect to it. Like it doesn't quite hit the marks that it's obviously going for, but it comes close enough to be serviceable. Oh yeah, a little water there. A little dry. Yeah. Yeah, well, I would, if you want to get into Raimi though, if you've never seen a Sam Raimi movie, I would check out Evil Dead 2, Spider-Man 2. I feel like the Spider-Man movies kind of make it so everybody's at least has experience with Sam Raimi. And a lot of the same qualities that he brought to the Spider-Man movies, the fun, the sense of fun, the goofiness of it is totally on display here as well. Although a more recent movie was kind of like a Raimi's return to form. He kind of went back to almost like the Evil Dead era roots, his Army of Darkness roots. Probably more Army of Darkness than the Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2. It was Drag Me to Hell. Like I mentioned earlier, I rebought it recently. I never owned it on Blu-ray, but I had it on DVD for years. And I'm really glad I repurchased it. It had been a while since I had seen that, and maybe I'll do a Scream Factory review because there's a lot of cool features on it, a lot of interesting stuff to talk about when it comes to that one, Drag Me to Hell. So if you would like to get ahead of the next review, and you have an opportunity to, check out Drag Me to Hell. I think that'll probably be the next thing I talk about. Because it's a fun movie. It would be awesome to talk about that movie. All right, everybody. Shaun from Zoobox out. Goodbye. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Enjoy your day.